Hello and welcome to Ginger Prime. My name is Brian, and if you're a returning subscriber, welcome back, Soul Nation. Today we're diving into the world of Summoner and setting it up on the controller in Final Fantasy XIV. If you're new to the channel or you're new to these style of videos, welcome. We're going to kind of break up this video into chapters so you can jump to any particular section that you wish to jump to. But we'll start with setting up your controller for the basics, getting you going if you're just generally curious or you just have never seen a controller guide before, and then we'll move into kind of my layout and we'll talk about Summoner, how it plays on a controller, and some things to kind of consider when playing this job. There's a lot to break down. These videos tend to be a lot longer than I like, but hopefully you get something out of it. If you do, let me know in the comments below. I've put at least over 2 months into this specific guide, and we'll talk about more why later in the video itself, and then we'll also talk about my gear and more. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you do, be sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button, come back for more of the content. You can always unsubscribe later if you don't like what we put out here on YouTube, but I'm gonna leave it up to you for there. Now let's go ahead and dive in and set up your controller for the Summoner. When starting out in Final Fantasy XIV, you'll be asked if you want to play with the controller or if you want to just keep keyboard and mouse settings, but you can always go to your system and character configuration and easily toggle between the two different setups. In fact, you actually have two different complete UI options for this, and you can see here by even switching the input, it's changing my movement settings from standard type and legacy type. Now, just to kind of highlight what standard type is and legacy type, you can see here, like if I go ahead and just like minimize my window, the legacy type has me whenever I'm moving the controller in a particular direction, moving around like I feel like you should in a third or three-dimensional game. But if you switch to standard type, which is character-based movement, you can actually press back and move backwards and strafe left and right and move forward like you naturally would on I guess in a typical MMO keyboard and mouse setup. So note that you could play around a lot with these settings and more. In fact, if you're looking for more information overall about getting started with the controller, I do have an ultimate controller guide that is linked in the description that goes over like every possible thing that you could possibly want to know. Now, I want to focus in on filters because when playing this job, it is a DPS job. Damage is your priority. You do have some utility as a summoner, but I want to make it easy for you to target. And so I have it set up with enable target cycling. By default, I have it as custom when my weapon is sheathed or put away. And then I have it focusing on enemies when my weapon is drawn. You can see here, I actually turn off party members. The reason is that on a controller, pressing up and down on the D-pad will help you cycle through your party members. But if you don't want that, you can turn that on if you so wish. Really, the choice is up to you. And then for enemies, I have it as all enemies, aggroing enemies, and duty specific. Now, the game does support a couple of pre-built filter lists, and then you can customize it to your heart's extent, and it will tell you custom from here. Now, the other thing you also have at your power when using a controller, you can actually hold down the left bumper or L1 button if you're on PlayStation, and you can actually have additional filters that you can pre-build and easily cycle between by pressing any of the face buttons, the X, Y, A, B, etc. And so you can do that. And I can kind of demonstrate all this for you right here. So if you see here, I've got my custom set. If I pull out my weapon, now I'm on enemies. What does this look like? Well, if I press left and right on the D-pad to do some targeting, you can see it's just going to keep targeting everything within a range. Now, if I pull out my weapon itself and I start doing that, it's only going to filter between enemies or what it considers to be a targetable enemy attack here. So you see here, instead of targeting everything, now I'm only focusing on enemies. If I go ahead and press on the weapon itself, let me just click on this and press down on the right stick to draw out my weapon. If I am actually having a thing targeted, you can see here I will actually lock on target. And so just like before with standard type, if you press backwards while locked on, you're going to back away slowly from them, and it's going to keep that kind of Zelda-esque lock-on system. And that's the same way that you bring it in and put out your weapon. If you have a target, it's going to then lock on target, so to speak, for filtering. Now, if I hold down L bumper, I can press the buttons, and you can see down to the below, my filter list is changing. So that is how you can kind of manage that. And obviously, it will return a default to wherever you need it when playing. To get to your settings for your hotbar, this is how you're going to go about it. So you have your display. I have display hotbar numbers turned off. If I turn that on, you can see all these little floating hotbars. I have hide unassigned slots turned on. If I turn that off, you can see all these little gray bars. The reason is, especially on a controller, even if you're playing keyboard and mouse, your controller is still always hooked up and the game will respond to it. I like to have these floating hotbars out here. You can see it listed right here. And while I'm not actively clicking on any of these things while in combat, these are just here to communicate to me what I need to know. If you ever needed to, if you're like on PlayStation, you don't have access to a mouse hooked up to your system, you can press that L1 button again and press down as a click on the right stick, and all of a sudden your right stick will actually become a mouse function, and your left click or your right click become left trigger and right trigger respectively. You can always hold down L1 and click the stick to be able to get out of that virtual mouse mode. So that's how you would go and drag actions onto any kind of floating hotbar out there on your UI. So that's just going to be something that will become a little bit more natural, but you're not going to use it by default. I think on PS4 and 5, you can also use the touchpad for a few things here and there. So just note that's how I do it, and I have those right there listed so that I have those communicating information to me. I'm not actively clicking on those options themselves. Now under the sharing tab, I have my sharing for cross hotbar set to 7 and 8. That means no matter what job or class I'm playing, whatever I put on 7 and 8 is going to be shared across the board with them. Anything that's job or class specific has not checked. So if I change to Dragoon, it's going to have its own skills and abilities. If you had that shared, yes, you would see Dragoon abilities placed there across the board. It can be kind of confusing, but just note you want to make sure that you have stuff set up for your job, and then you have stuff that like your limit break, your mounts and minions. I can kind of highlight those right here. Your sprint, things that are available across everything. Might as well put it, where it needs to go and belong. Now under the cross hotbar section itself, I have it in hold mode. If you're having accessibility issues or just trouble with this, you can always try out the toggle in mixed mode. I would not personally recommend it because you lose access to the expanded cross hotbar, which you can see here by holding down right trigger and then left trigger and left trigger and then right trigger. You also lose the access to the double cross hotbar, which you can see here, me double tapping. In fact, you can always say always display W cross hotbar, and you'll see here that I have returned to cross hotbar after W cross hotbar input. What that allows me to do is kind of like a one-off ability. In this case, let's just say, let me go and buff myself with a potion. And thus I'm now actually actively as a part of my main rotation. So I'm able to do things and put them, or like swift cast, and then automatically I'm still back in here doing these skills and be able to attack accordingly. And then finally, last bit of it I have under custom, enable the expanded controls with left trigger and right trigger. That's the expanded cross hotbar you see here. So I have LT and RT set to cross hotbar 7 right, so that is the shared, so my sprint and more. Then I have my cross hotbar 2 left set to right trigger then left trigger, and you can see here I have additional abilities accessible to me at any given time. So that is how I've got that set up right here. Now for the W cross hotbar, you will not be able to drag anything and drop anything onto the hotbar 3. You have to actually go into the hotbar in this case and be able to set the skills. So if I kind of move Bahamut right here, you can see here he's moving around, and that's how that is managed. Unfortunately, you have no way to interact with it here. It's just for you able to double tap into, kind of acting more like a shortcut. So just note that's going to be how you manage it itself. Now, I have it with enabled directional buttons, and I have it set to 3 left and 3 right. You can set that to any hotbar that you want. So just these numbers are just how I've got it set up, and I'm used to it. You can always set it to 4 or 5, whatever you need to be able to make that change. And then down here under set selection, I have enable customization when my weapon is sheathed and when my weapon is drawn. When my weapon's away, hotbar 1, 7, and 8 will actually go as a part of the cycle, and when my weapon is drawn, I'm going to keep myself locked on hotbar 1 just in case I accidentally press the right bumper button. So if I go and close out of this and not make any changes, you can see here my weapon's away. If I press right bumper, I am just kind of filtering between hotbar 1, 7, and 8. If you hold down right bumper, you can see here you can jump to any particular hotbar that you want by pressing any of the corresponding buttons. Or if I have my weapon out and I press right bumper, you can see here it's not changing. The only way to change in this mode is to hold it down and press a face button, so that way you don't accidentally get thrown off the beaten course in this regards. So thank you so much for tuning in for the 101 controller setup. If you guys have any questions, again, let me know in the comments below, or hit up my ultimate controller guide. It's a little bit more on the longer side, but it should get you going. Here's where we come to the meat and potatoes of this video. This is that work of love. I put 2 months into this. I've made more changes on Summoner than I care to admit, and it kind of somewhat might feel a little bit weird saying 2 months, and that's because I started this several months ago, and I just continue to put in it, and that's why you actually got Red Mage before you got Summoner, because I was really struggling with it. I wasn't having a good time, but I felt like there was a way to get this layout just perfect. I've tested this with parsing, I've tested this by running it, and I continue to improve. I've tested this with dungeons and with the raids, and overall I've continued to improve and improve and improve. And putting it in this kind of setup has just made it so much easier. This is just my opinion, so you can take this and make it your own. Always with these guides, I'm not here to say how is the right way that you should do it. I'm just here to give some ideas and help it. Also, thanks and huge shout out to the community, people providing their different layouts on how they had their setup, and some of that did influence this. So again, thank you guys so much for helping me on this journey, because it was one where I didn't want this video to be just a complaining video. I wanted to share how much I love this job itself. Let's get a pet. Let's get a pet out here. Summoner is very pet based, and so we'll go and bring out Ifrit, let him kind of do his thing. And so we can see here how we've got my skills laid out. Let's start with my top bar. I've got my Aether gauge, and then I've got my my Bahamut and all my cool stuff, power stuff, driven into into this bar here. So you can kind of see it splitting the difference with Ruin 2, Summon Bahamut, Siphon, Energy Siphon, and Death Flare, all listed out here just to help communicate this kind of information to me. I don't want to miss these particular skills, but they're also kind of changing to do other things to help communicate. Ruin 2 is here because it can evolve into Ruin 4, and I don't want to miss that. And you can see here that I don't actually have Ruin 2 anywhere on this bar, so you can see I've got that actually listed here as a part of my expanded hotbar, so something specifically on the move. A lot of this will actually have things that I want to be able to do that are more instacast on the ABXY axis, so that when I'm moving I have a little bit easier time. You can easily kind of pop over into kind of an up, down, left, right situation. I do tend to try to avoid it whenever possible. All right, so that's kind of the top hotbar. Let's go W cross hotbar left. We'll work our way all the way to the round to the right. Some Bahamut, I've got Aether Pact, not necessarily even that important. You could always go and take that kind of potions and put them over here on this side if necessary. I've got Physic, which is my cure, Surecast, which is going to prevent me from getting knocked back. I've got Lucid Dreaming, it's going to help me recover MP. And then I got Swiftcast for whenever I need to do an easy Swiftcast and I just want to pop in here and turn that on. Now over here on the left-hand side, Dreadworm Trance, Pain Flare, Death Flare, and Enkindle Inferno, followed by Assault 1 and Assault 2, depending on the pet that you have out. You can see here if I bring out Titan, that Assault is going to change to Mountain Buster, and same thing with Enkindle. So those are just kind of my pet abilities and skills. Aether Pack there, and then I have Enkindle Bahamut. I'll show you this macro. So if you go into user macros, you can start to go and find all the different ways that you've got, at least I've got these macros configured. So here's the macro, and you'll see here that I actually have macro icon here at the bottom. It actually helps out with the performance of macros, whether it is even slightly in this regards. But this is Enkindle Bahamut and Summon Bahamut. Enkindle Bahamut being the priority, again, how macros work in the system. It's top one, then the second the other. This helps reduce the amount of buttons that are on my screen, and that's why it's important to have Bahamut up here visible so I know that he is ready to be summoned, because it's really more about the enkindling of him that I am wanting to go with. Hopefully that's going to be some change that we see Square Enix make in the future. And in fact, if you're watching this video in the future, for reference, check the top link in the description for the playlists, so that way you can get caught up on any and all of these controller guides. So there we go. That's the left hand side. On the right hand side, we've got Dreadworm Trance, Pain Flare, Death Flare, Fester, Ruin 3, Energy Drain, Try Disaster, and Outburst. So you'll see here, and the only risk here when it comes to Outburst being in this position, I can go ahead and close out of the macros. The only real risk here is that you accidentally hit Outburst when you're wanting a Ruin 3. For the most part, I haven't had any struggle with it. If it becomes a problem, you can always probably swap these out, or whatever ends up making the most sense for you. It ends up being, especially as Summoner, is that sometimes you have spells that have cast times, and then obviously in Dreadworm Trance, you don't have cast times. Everything becomes insta-cast. So Summoner is a weird, interesting, awesome experiment when it comes to that kind of playstyle. Energy Drain being an important aspect, because that's going to feed you your Aether Flow stacks, which will enable Fester or Pain Flare in that regards. If you guys are returning to Summoner after a time, Bane does no longer take an Aether Flow, so you can just Bane every 10 seconds, which spreads your dots around. So that's why I actually have Bane in this position. We'll just go around the horn and we'll talk about kind of the theory crafting behind all of this. So Bio 2, Miasma 3, Bane, Siphon, Energy Siphon, which is essentially the AoE version of this. They share the cooldown for Energy Drain, so do not fear. I kind of pop up here for an AoE rotation or here for a single target. Regardless, at the end of the day, I just want to make sure that I keep those you know, filling up the aether flows, and I'm burning those as often as I can. Then over here, I've got my Tincture of Intelligence high quality, and then I have Tincture Intelligence as well, and then I have a high elixir. This is just essentially for my own self benefit. And then I also have another Enkindle in case I'm over here on the right hand side. I want to be able to pop into this rather than just kind of fumbling my way over there. All this is to say it's just about that comfort level in terms of being able to play and pull out the right summon for the right job. Now I do love to have like my Gerudo, which you can see here is Eggy Glamoured into my Ruby Carby, and then I for like AoE, and I like to bring out Ifrit for kind of bosses. So that's kind of my whole ebb and flow with kind of how I choose my summons themselves. Now that does not mean we're done. You can see here clearly with the 7 and 8, the 7 share, I got a couple of macros, Limit Break, mounts, you know, my Wonders, Tails, and Sprint. But more or less, I've also got a couple skills over here. So let's go ahead and pop into Hotbar 2, where you'll see Ruin 2, Swift Cast, Resurrection, Tri Disaster. The reason is especially if I'm on the move and I'm burning some Ruin 4s and Tri Disaster is up and I need to be able to use that, I can do so and then pop easily, quickly into Bane, very comfortably, in fact. Addle, I got Summon 3, Summon 2, and Summon to be able to pick out and pull out the appropriate pet for the situation at hand for what here is needed. So what you'll notice here about this kind of setup, and the reason kind of why I end up having it rather than trying to have like enforce AoEs over here, I kept struggling. And in fact, if you saw the original Summoner controller guide that I released like when Shadowbringers came out and the job changes were made, it worked, but it didn't really feel good. It really kind of struggled with it in a certain couple of areas. But overall, whether you're running a dungeon or you're rather just kind of a single boss tier fight, you have access to the things that you need where and when you need them. Being able to move around and make sure that your pet is knocking these things out, because these are instacasts, which will then proc a Ruin 4, gives you a lot of power, personally speaking, because you can do that and then easily pop into here for Ruin 4 attacks, and while those stacks are available. It allows for easy Tri Disaster and Bane connection. Energy Drain and Siphon are kind of also in the same mental area. You just have to double tap to be able to pop in for an AoE perspective. When you go into Dreadworm Trance, Outburst is also it's an AoE, but it's now instacast, so it allows you to have that movement when these abilities are on instacast. And the only thing that kind of will catch you, and so just as a fair warning, as you're learning the summoner, try not to cancel out of casts. This is going to be tied to proper placement within the content and the fights themselves, but also you know, don't be worried about just having one go off if you accidentally fat finger it in this regard. So I mean, I've tried macros, I've tried so many different things, the only macro being Enkindle. The nice thing is, if we go ahead and actually kind of like test this out for rotation, one of the things that I didn't really talk about at the start is that for our targeting, whenever you're holding down the left and right trigger, you actually have the ability to do a couple different things. And that is essentially the left bumper and right bumper become another form of targeting your enemies themselves. So if I go and start like an attack, get this rocking and rolling, doing some festering if I need to. Getting some action over here. You'll see here now, obviously I can bring out Bahamut. So if I bring out Bahamut and start doing his rotation, as I try to put this guy together, I'm sure someone's like, you're clearly missing a GCDs. And it's like, yes I am. Especially I also let some dots fall off. Manage your dots as best as possible. But here you go, I'll do another Enkindle. You can see here that works without any problem, and I can keep going. But now what you'll notice is that obviously Dreadworm Trance is now a part of Phoenix. This is where things kind of got tricky for me as a player, because as these things evolve, some of these skills evolved, some of them haven't. And so now that Phoenix is about to come up off cooldown, I can pop into Phoenix, and you can see here, I just have to pop over there for one Enkindling of a Phoenix. But here I actually have the Phoenix combo working really well together. And so I can easily and also quickly move around and do these things all together and have a very comfortable approach when it comes to playing the job itself. So you get a lot of flexibility, personally speaking, when it comes to being able to attack and be able to move around and have kind of really whatever you're looking for. Hey, there's my friend Clink. What's up, Clink? All right, so that brings us to kind of the final section, just kind of talking about the gear and overall. So you can see here I'm rocking some crafted gear and I'm rocking some 510, pretty much 510 across the board outside of a couple pieces here and there. So I've got the Entark Grimoire, I've got the Enmet Hat of Casting, the Enmet Hat, the Exarch's Gloves of Casting, the Exarch's Plates, which you can't see, and those are going away in Endwalker, the Cryptek Lurker's Chausis of Casting. Then I've got the Enmet's Boots of Casting, and then on the right hand side, the Exarchs here, and then Enmet. So I'm just kind of bouncing between those two as a part of my layout and for my character here, which is a beautiful Ronso. Beautiful layout. I really enjoy the Ronso in this game. Hopefully, guys, this has been a help. Hopefully you found something good in it. If you have, be sure to let me know. Leave a comment. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share this video out with any summoners out there that maybe want to check out this game for the first time or play on a controller. The thing you should know more than anything else is there's an awesome free trial for this game that you can play all the way up through level 60. And that's the pitch. Like I'm really happy with where actually I got Summoner to after all that work. Hopefully you've either already arrived at that conclusion or this helps and you can kind of check out the job and see how it feels for yourself. As always, let me know, right or wrong, one way or the other, in the comments, and let me know how I did, if this is something that works out for you. I really hope that's the case. Anyway, guys, I'm going to sound off. For Ginger Prime, my name is Brian. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you have a fantastic day, and I hope to see you in my next video. Until then, take care. This video is sponsored by me, Ginger Prime. Hopefully you'll check out my podcast channel, Ginger Gaming Radio, which we have lots of guests, lots of great conversations, and even more highlights. Links are in the description below. Let me know what you think. Thanks.